Good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Jarrett in for Lou Dobbs. The Trump Justice Department taking direct aim at Clinton corruption. New reports tonight that Attorney General Jeff Sessions has ordered Justice Department prosecutors to investigate just how the Clintons managed to rake in millions from the controversial sale of Uranium One. We'll take it up with Chris Farrell of Judicial Watch. Also tonight, Congress will avoid a government shutdown. The House has approved a temporary measure to keep the government running, and the U.S. Senate right now still voting on the bill. They're one vote short, I am told in my ear. We'll have a full report on that. And the Trump administration tonight threatening to cut off funds to the United Nations after the international body voted resoundingly to reject President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Ambassador John Bolton is here with more on that tonight. Our top story, a major development in the Uranium One scandal. Attorney General Jeff Sessions reportedly ordering the Department of Justice to look closely into alleged Clinton collusion with Russia. The goal, determine whether a special counsel should be appointed to investigate how the Clinton Foundation raked in millions from the Russians, just as Hillary Clinton's State Department approved a deal for Russia to buy Uranium One. Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry has our report.
Not looking good. It's not looking good.
A year dominated in part by President Trump being in the crosshairs of a special counsel investigation is ending with Attorney General Jeff Sessions ordering that Justice Department prosecutors press FBI agents about why they did not seek charges in the Uranium One deal involving Hillary Clinton.
I think the end game would be, number one, if they actually found something, they certainly would be potentially capable of reopening the investigation and handling it as though it were an active, ongoing criminal matter.
That could mean a second special counsel beyond Robert Mueller being named to probe the way investigations of Clinton's email server, as well as the Uranium One deal that involves contributions to the Clinton Foundation, were handled by then FBI Director James Comey, his deputy Andrew McCabe, and a top agent, Peter Strzok, who sent those text messages supporting Hillary Clinton, who recently dismissed questions about Uranium One.
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years.
Yet today, the Senate Intelligence Committee heard closed-door testimony from Bruce Ohr, recently demoted at the Justice Department for not disclosing his connections to the Trump dossier.
He has a meeting during the election with Christopher Steele, the same guy that the Democrats through Fusion GPS paid to do this discredited Trump dossier. And then, oh, by the way, Bruce Ohr's wife works for Fusion GPS, and Ohr meets with Fusion after the election. So how do you explain that conduct?
McCabe was pressed on the dossier today, meanwhile, in a long private session with the House Judiciary Committee, after facing 7 hours of questioning by the House Intelligence Committee on Tuesday, where he could not recall when he learned the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid for the dossier, leading Senator Rand Paul to tweet today, "Time to investigate high-ranking Obama government officials who might have colluded to prevent the election of @real Donald Trump. This could be worse than Watergate." Democrats insisted this is a diversion from the real issue,
which was the Russian attempt to subvert the last election, the possible collusion, well, the certain collusion by many members of the Trump campaign.
Other Democrats claim this is an attempt to undermine Mueller's investigation and potentially fire him over the holidays, a charge the president and his legal team have consistently denied. Greg?
Ed Henry. Ed, thanks. Congress tonight averting just moments ago a government shutdown. The House before that had passed a stopgap spending bill to fund the government through January 19th. The Senate moments ago followed suit, and it looks like the tally right now is 62-32. All they needed were 60. Fox News correspondent Peter Ducey is on Capitol Hill, filed this report earlier.
The American people are counting on Congress.
If the Senate okays the short-term budget just approved by the House by 11:59 tomorrow night, almost every federal program stays funded at current spending levels till January 19th, with the exception of a handful of Pentagon programs that get small budget increases. That's even though some Republicans wish the military got a beefier boost.
Anytime you're talking about deficits and just extending, doing a continuing resolution, it's hard because, one, it hurts our defense. And so I think the area that's bothering us the most is our military is going to get their 33rd CR in a decade. after sequester cuts, and our military's readiness is hurting.
The continuing resolution also puts automatic Medicare cuts on the shelf until 2019 and funds the Children's Health Insurance Program through March. Both those provisions enjoy broad bipartisan support, but Democrats, upset they didn't have much of a say in the debate, are forcing Republicans to go it alone.
If you've got the votes, you don't have to talk to us. But if you don't have the votes, we really need to come together in a bipartisan way to be the responsible stewards of this government.
A sore spot for one senator in this budget, the reauthorization of an NSA spying tool, FISA Section 702.
The short-term extension is okay. I will absolutely filibuster any long-term extension. They try to do it for a year, they try to do it for 4 years, or they try to do it forever, which some of them want. There needs to be more oversight.
Not in the short-term budget, a DACA fix. So, despite the demands of Democratic lawmakers, there's no new resolution for people brought to this country illegally as children.
I don't think in his heart that the president intended to hurt these people in the very cruel way that they are being hurt by the actions that are being taken.
Uncharacteristically quiet about his DACA strategy today, Senator Chuck Schumer, who seems content using DACA as leverage over Republicans next time there's a shutdown fight in January, days before the State of the Union.
We're not talking about that issue until we see what the House does.
One retiring Republican, Congressman Charlie Dent, says he's seen things in his 7 terms that give him confidence a shutdown can be avoided.
There'll be drama, there'll be chaos, there'll be yelling and screaming, and then we'll avert a shutdown. But that's what happens. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be this way.
There may be trouble brewing in the Senate tonight for $81 billion worth of government assistance for the victims of wildfires and hurricanes. It needed a lot of Democratic support to pass in the House, and conservatives are very wary of the package because the new spending is not offset by cuts elsewhere. Greg?
Peter Ducey. Peter, thanks. And as I mentioned, the U.S. Senate has just approved the continuing resolution. It'll keep the government open until January 19th. It now goes to the president. The vote so far is 62 to 32. With a historic win on tax cuts under his belt, President Trump took time to celebrate the holidays with some of America's finest today. They're still on a victory lap. Taxes to go. A signing ceremony the administration says could come tomorrow. Fox News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has our report.
Greg, good evening. There is every indication that this is shaping up to be a very Merry Christmas for President Trump, with the expected signing tomorrow of the biggest achievement of his presidency. The lift from a huge legislative victory still under his wings, President Trump left the White House today to wish Merry Christmas to some of the heroes who keep this country safe.
I'm heading over right now to Walter Reed Military Medical Center, say hello to some of the bravest people anywhere in the world.
It's a tradition for U.S. presidents to visit Walter Reed and thank the wounded men and women for their service. President Trump enjoys wide support from the military, pledging to rebuild and re-equip U.S. forces. But the president's promises ride on Republicans and Democrats in Congress reaching a long-term spending agreement next year. Today, the White House was urging Congress to just keep the government running for the next 4 weeks with a continuing resolution.
We want a clean bill, and that's what we hope happens, and we hope it happens soon because we know all of you guys and all of Congress and everybody else is ready to make sure that the government is fully funded and functional and go home and celebrate Christmas.
The president is anxious to get a continuing resolution on his desk because he wants to sign tax reform tomorrow before he leaves for his Christmas vacation at Mar-a-Lago. But in order to sign the bill tomorrow, the president needed waivers contained in the CR to prevent cuts to entitlement programs.
It's always a lot of fun when you win.
Still, there is plenty for the president to celebrate, including word from more companies of tax reform-related bonuses. Boeing, AT&T, Wells Fargo, Comcast, and Fifth Third Bancorp all announcing either bonuses for employees or wage increases, even more charitable giving. President Trump believes this is just the beginning.
We're bringing the entrepreneur back into this country. We're getting rid of all the knots and all the ties, and we're going to You're going to see what happens. And ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs, 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 jobs.
And there was good news for the president on the economic front. The Bureau of Economic Analysis revised third quarter GDP down 1/10 of a point to 3.2%, but combined with second quarter growth of 3.1%, the U.S. economy had its best back-to-back performances in 3 years. But the president may face new opposition in his quest to replace Obamacare next year. Numbers released today show enrollment in Obamacare surpassed expectations. 8.8 million people signed up for health insurance on the federal exchanges during open enrollment. That's 400,000 fewer than last year, though still surprisingly strong, given the administration's efforts to undermine the program.
They tried for months to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would have sent costs soaring for millions of Americans and caused millions more to lose coverage. They failed in that effort. But they have consistently undermined ACA in every way they can think of.
After the vote on tax reform yesterday, President Trump claimed to have repealed Obamacare by eliminating the tax penalty in the individual mandate. But repealing the individual mandate does not in any way fully repeal Obamacare, though it may hasten its demise through a combination of lower revenues and higher insurance premiums. Greg?
John Roberts of the White House. John, thanks very much. We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Capitol Hill rumor mill is firing on all cylinders these days. Democrats absolutely apoplectic over the possibility that President Trump might fire special counsel Robert Mueller over the Christmas break. Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer today voicing his concerns over a potential constitutional crisis. The White House once again attempting to allay those fears.
For the 1,000th time, we have no intentions of firing Bob Mueller. We're continuing to work closely and cooperate with him. We look forward to seeing this hoax wrap up very soon. We think that it is just further evidence that the Democrats have no plan. They have no agenda. They have nothing to talk to about other than attacking this president. While they've been focused on Russia, this president has been focused on America.
Joining me now to talk about the Mueller investigation, Chris Farrell, Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. Chris, good to see you. I was looking at the latest polling data. A majority of Americans think the Mueller investigation is tainted. He himself has disqualifying conflicts of interest. Does Mueller have only himself to blame for the lack of faith and confidence that Americans have in the investigation because he selected an entire panel of partisans?
You are exactly correct. And he also is completely unable to articulate what the criminal predicate is for his investigation. No one can tell you what crime's been committed. And instead, they're investigating people looking for a crime, which frankly is Stalinist. That's not the way we operate in this country.
Show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Or
Exactly.
I'll find you the crime. Is it increasingly clear to you that there may have been those within the FBI and the Department of Justice who, for political reasons, decided that they were going to go about clearing Hillary Clinton, notwithstanding evidence of criminality, and simultaneously as a backup plan, let's frame Donald Trump with a meritless investigation in order to bring him down?
It is. I mean, it's not even an open question anymore because we have a variety of characters either under oath or in the form of various electronic communications saying exactly that. And so we have these draft documents where they try to water down the claim out of 18 U.S.C. 793F, which is mishandling national defense information, something I'm very familiar with prosecuting from a standpoint of being a special agent. And then the flip side of that is you've got these guys talking about insurance policies, meaning they're going to leverage the phonied up dossier from Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele and turn that into a FISA warrant to go on a fishing expedition against the president.
That's a crime, isn't it, Chris?
It certainly is a crime.
If you use a dubious, if not phony document in an affidavit in support of a warrant to wiretap, that's a fraud on the court, isn't it?
It is. It's also misconduct on the part of the agents. It's a prosecutorial abuse on the part of the attorneys involved. It's a train wreck of misconduct. And this is all hanging around Mueller's neck.
Right.
They can't get away from it. And then what they have done when it comes to actually bringing charges against people is that the very thin gruel of a 1001 claim, false official statements on General Flynn.
Right.
And conspicuously absent is a 371 charge of conspiracy. You know why? Because there were no conspirators, because there was no crime. In every other case, when you see a 1001 charge for false official statements,
sure,
you always have the guy roll in who else he was in conspiracy
Well, not
with.
only that, but
it's not there.
But Mueller arguably illegally obtaining documents from the transition team to use to implicate Michael Flynn. Flynn's lawyers ought to go to court, shouldn't they, and withdraw the plea and challenge the evidence under the exclusionary rule. Say, you can't use evidence that was illegally obtained.
It is. It's all fruit of the poisonous tree kind of stuff. And this is, investigation 101 and, law school 101.
Right.
But both sides of the equation, the investigators, the special agents involved from the various agencies, and the attorneys involved, they all know better. And this is a very dishonest, disingenuous game that they're playing because they've got to come back with a scalp.
So it looks like Jeff Sessions is now ordering the DOJ to start investigating whether Hillary Clinton engaged in pay-to-play. It's fraud and corruption, bribery in the Uranium One deal. Simultaneously, should they reopen the email case because there appears to be an abundance of evidence, and the statute of limitations hadn't run, that she mishandled classified documents, 110 classified documents on her unauthorized, unsecured private email server?
The answer is yes. Of course, they have to investigate both issues. Thankfully, the American public knows about the email server because of the work of Judicial Watch.
Right.
But what I want to know is, I would love to see the rights warning interview of Mueller, Comey, Weissman, Rosenstein. How are they going to address that with respect to both Uranium One and the email investigation?
Right. Well, do you suspect that Comey, McCabe, Peter Strzok, maybe Rybicki was involved, as well as James Baker, all of these guys together within the FBI, that they deliberately changed the wording of the exoneration statement that was initially drafted by James Comey to absolve Hillary Clinton so that it would pave the way for her to become president?
On the 2nd of July, 2016, that Saturday, my first question was, hey, that interview of Hillary Clinton, was it a rights warning event? That's all you had to know. And the answer back was no, it was not a rights warning event. And then you knew for a fact it was a coffee and donut session arranged by David Kendall.
Right. And when you say rights session, they didn't, read her
They didn't Mirandize her.
Right. Mirandize her. She said, I don't recall 39 times during that coffee and donut session with the FBI.
And let me
She
pause
remembered
with that.
her name and date of birth, and that was about it.
In any legitimate investigation, when someone says that to you, you pause, you pull out her non-disclosure agreement, you ask her to refresh her recollection and review the document that she signed, and then have her affirm or certify that's her signature on her document, and then let her explain how she doesn't remember it.
Right. I mean,
that wasn't done.
Here was a document. She signed it.
Correct.
It's sworn. It says, I understand the tutorial I received on classified documents. I can't put them in an unauthorized place, which is precisely what she did. But she apparently said, gee, I don't remember getting that tutorial. I don't remember signing this document. She actually signed two documents, Chris.
That's true. And part of those documents says it doesn't matter if you don't remember.
Right.
This still applies to you no matter what. So you can't wiggle away from it. But the problem is the agents doing the interview did not do that.
Right. Well, because they were yucking it up, having a good time, and because Peter Strzok was doing the interview, the top FBI official, and now we know that his texts were littered with I love Hillary Clinton texts to his lover, who was an FBI lawyer. I mean, it's really astonishing stuff.
It's disgusting is what it is.
If you look up corruption in the dictionary, there should be a picture there of those folks involved. Chris Farrell.
I agree.
Chris, good to see you.
Thanks, Rick.
And be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you believe it's time to stop handling taxpayer dollars handing to the leftist United Nations? that undermines and disrespects America at every turn. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow Lou on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like him on Facebook. Follow him on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street, stocks closed higher yet again. The Dow gaining 55 points, S&P up 5 points, NASDAQ up 4. Volume of the big board, 3.2 billion shares. Goldman Sachs says it will launch a cryptocurrency trading desk expected to be up and running by the end of next June. And more companies are sharing the wealth thanks to President Trump's tax cuts. Wells Fargo and Fifth Third Bank Corp will boost their company-wide minimum wages to $15 an hour. Talk about immediate relief. And a reminder, listen to Lou's reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Coming up next, U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley puts the United Nations on notice.
But this vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered.
We're going to have a full report on the fallout of a landslide vote condemning the United States right down the street from here, straight ahead. Some drama at the United Nations today. U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley put more than 100 member nations on notice following a landslide vote condemning America's decision to move its Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. Fox News senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is at the UN tonight with the latest.
When we make generous contributions to the UN, we also have a legitimate expectation that our goodwill is recognized and respected.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley making it clear to member states of the world body that America has the right to move its embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, warning that siding against the decision by President Trump could have deep financial consequences.
America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do. And it is the right thing to do. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that.
The UN called this emergency session to debate a resolution rejecting the U.S. decision recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Proposed by Turkey and Yemen, the resolution drew the support of nearly every single Arab and Muslim country and many more around the globe.
We believe the decision by the U.S. government to relocate the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem is regrettable and is not constructive in advancing a sustainable solution.
We will not be intimidated. You can be strong, but this doesn't make you right.
The state of Palestine respects the sovereignty of states so long as this sovereignty is in line with international law. However, we refuse to have sovereignty used as an excuse to violate international law.
The vote was overwhelming, 128 in favor, just 9 opposed, and 35 abstaining. A stark reminder that Israel has a short list of friends.
Those who support today's resolution are like puppets. You are puppets pulled by the strings of your Palestinian puppet masters. You are like marionettes forced to dance while the Palestinian leadership looks on with glee.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called today's resolution preposterous and says Jerusalem is Israel's capital, always was, always will be. And the White House says the embassy will still move. The only question is when and how the president will punish the nations that didn't support him here today. Greg?
Rick Leventhal. Rick, thanks very much. We're going to talk about the UN vote with Ambassador John Bolton coming up a bit later in the broadcast. We're coming right back. Much more. Stay with us. There will be no Christmas shutdown for the federal government. The House and the Senate short time ago approved a bill late this afternoon to fund the government through January 19th, with a few sweeteners for the military and child health care. President Trump expected to sign the bill sometime tomorrow. Joining me now to talk about that and the tax cuts, Republican Congressman Keith Rothfuss, who sits on the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, good to see you.
Good to see you.
There have been more than 30 continuing resolutions over the last decade. I think it's about 5 per year to keep the government running. This one only lasts for, 30 days. I mean, it's kind of like popping a roll edge. You know, it's good for a couple of hours, and then you're suffering indigestion. Doesn't something need to be done longer than 30 days?
Absolutely. This has been a very frustrating process. I've looked at this issue since before I ran to Congress. I think the last time everything was done on time was 1996, where all appropriations bills were passed by September 30th. This year, the House actually did the work by September 30th. Unfortunately, the Senate did not. It's stuck in the Senate. This has been a very serious issue for our defense budget, making sure that our defense planners have the resources. We have people out in the field. I made a trip to the Middle East right before Thanksgiving. This is a very serious situation. It's very frustrating to see Democrats holding the defense budget hostage, demanding more spending, dollar for dollar, or whatever their formula is. There's no correlation at all between maintaining a robust defense and what we're spending on the domestic side.
Right, because
that link has to be broken.
You have to plan well in advance, and if you're only working on 30-day increments, you can't possibly do that. And so our military and our defense of Americans out there suffers. I do want to ask you about the tax cuts. Democrats continue to decry this, but Republicans say 80% of Americans will see tax relief. And of course, Congressman, we've already seen a bunch of major companies start cutting checks, $1,000 checks to send out to their workers as bonuses because of this. Doesn't that undermine the Democrats' claim?
That's the sound of an economy revving up. We've been stuck going sideways for 10, 15 years. Think about the kids who graduated from college in the early 2000s who have never really seen a healthy, robust economy. We have a great opportunity with the tax reform and tax cut package we just put out. And there is direct and immediate help coming for the middle class. A single mom making $41,000 a year is going to see more than $1,300 back a year. The family of four making $73,000 is going to see more than $2,000 coming back. And then you have the economic growth that's going to kick in. And we're already seeing that when you see companies willing to make substantial investments in infrastructure that we saw from Comcast and AT&T yesterday, $1,000 going to employees. This is great news, and it's the beginning of making this country prosperous again.
I think it was John Kennedy who said a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's the whole point of this, that if you grow GDP, it expands the economy. Businesses come back to the U.S. They began to invest in their own companies, expanding those companies, raising wages, hiring more employees, and the economy becomes far more robust. And in the long run, isn't it true that the Treasury benefits as well with increased revenue?
It's absolutely true. It happened in the 1960s. It happened in the 1980s. It actually happened in the 1990s under President Clinton and the Republican Congress. Remember when President Clinton promised a middle-class tax cut in the 1992 campaign, and he got to Washington and he said he couldn't do it? Well, when Newt Gingrich came to town in 1994, they actually did that middle-class tax cut. They cut capital gains, and the revenues to the Treasury went significantly up and into surplus. The rising tide does lift all boats, and that's what this tax bill is all about.
All right. Congressman Keith Rothfuss, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, and Merry Christmas.
All right, you too. Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Do you believe it's time to stop handing taxpayer dollars to the leftist United Nations that always tends to undermine and disrespect America? Cast your vote at Twitter at Lou Dobbs. All right, please roll the videotape. These daredevils are sure to get your heart. That's dumb. That's risky. Yeah. All right, coming up next, House Republicans launching a probe into reports that the Obama administration derailed an investigation into drug trafficking by Hezbollah as President Obama sought to secure the Iran nuclear deal. We'll discuss it with Ambassador John Bolton.